We have kind of two choices when it comes to growing. We can either focus on the negative or focus on the positive, and by making a habit of doing one over the other, the results are quite extremely different from one another. The positive would be the asset. What are we good at? What do we enjoy doing? Whatever we dwell on will grow and intensify and develop further. So if we dwell on the positive, on our assets, on our enjoyments, then they will grow and lead to others of like nature and develop our body of experience into a body that expands in ever-increasing degrees of development of both joy and strength. Now, if we take the alternative and dwell on the negative, namely dwell on what's wrong, what's missing, what's disgusting or disagreeable that we have an aversion to, then naturally putting our attention on that will engage it such that it enlarges itself. So it'll become more disgusting, more repulsive, more upsetting, more losses and liabilities and burdens, and ultimately end in disaster. So it's a funny thing, though. You would think, oh, why would anybody want to do that? Nobody would. But what if somebody foists that on somebody else, saying, oh, it's your duty? Now we've got a dilemma. We have to extricate ourselves from that person, because to try to tell them they're wrong is dwelling on the negative, dwelling on what they're missing, dwelling, a lack of awareness, dwelling on a lack of focusing on assets. So it's making the same fault. And that's the catch. It's like a poison, like a poisonous virus that can spread. If you engage in somebody to tell them how wrong they are, you're doing the wrong thing. You've got to literally lie and say, yes, you're right, and walk away and never return. Because if you return, you'll have to face your lie by facing them. And of course you can't do that. They want to hear the lie, or else they wouldn't believe in living a negative truth, that somehow it's advantageous to dwell on the negative. No, it's not. They're stupid. But the only way they get away with it is not to force it on themselves, but to force it on somebody else, to spread the poison. That's the only way they can survive. And of course that means abuse. It means abusing others in order to survive with that kind of outlook. That's the only way you can survive with that kind of outlook, is to foist it on somebody else. Because if you foist it on yourself, it's suicide. So you can't agree with the person and remain with them, because that would mean infecting yourself with their poison. And yet, on the other hand, you can't disagree with them and remain with them, because that would further develop the poison. So either way you shake it, the common thread is you can't stay with them. So it doesn't matter whether you lie to them and say, yes, you're right, or just tell them to their face they're wrong. Either way, you have to walk away. And for me, the point of resolution in which I decide, oh, I really do need to walk away, and from everybody, and not just a few people, but every single person who honors and respects them, I have to walk away from those corollary friendships or associations as well. Because if they support that person, and if you support those people, then you support that person. And there is no getting around it. You have to get rid of every single person who supports that primary person from your existence, or else you have not extricated yourself from the individual, the primary individual that you're trying to extricate yourself from, so as not to allow yourself to become poisoned with their line of negative reasoning. And that's amazing. You have to tell everybody off. And that's a lot of people, because it's so much easier in today's world to be convenient and just go along and leave it alone and ignore it, it'll go away. Well, if you don't allow it into your house, but if you tell somebody else, no, you've got to be with me, and I honor that person, and yet I'm not going to get into details, but I gave you the logic. All the supportive people have to be excluded not just the primary, but the supportive ones as well. Because by simple logic, if you associate with B and B associate and supports A, then you support A. No, I don't. I'm C and I'm out of here. See me, not see me. Goodbye. And there's this idea of privacy. And I guess that's where, the ability to walk away. That's what privacy means. It doesn't mean you hide necessarily. That's one approach. It just means you separate. It's the quality of separation. And this is what we were told during the Civil War not to do, by virtue of the fact of, we lost the Civil War due to the fact that domination was imposed upon us, even though the country's constitution was being tested out on the theory that the states have the right to secede. They have the right to be themselves, to be unique from all the other states. And if they can't do that, living in a loose association with the other states, they have the right to secede. That didn't happen, did they? They flunked because the national government forced union upon everyone. And the North didn't necessarily want it. The northern states, they were forced into a war they didn't want, just like the South was willing to fight back, though. But the significant thing is the North won, but the North was forced into a war it never wanted by the national government. And that makes the victory a lie, a sham. It makes it a sham. So that now we think that it's okay to force somebody to do something against their will, against their better judgment, against their self-respect. It's okay to do that. Because in unity there's strength. Yeah, strength of this constant strife. And the only way to solve it is to sublimate our distinctive uniqueness. It's like, huh? So the Civil War is no longer an issue about the states, it's about the individual. That's it's been sublimated by being downgraded, down to the level of the individual. So now we, as individuals, carry the burden of secession, and we call it the right to privacy. Isn't that weird? Before it was called the right of states to secede from the Union, so if you didn't like one state, you could always move to a different state and hang out there. But if you're forced to be in association, all the different states are in association with each other, where are you going to run to? They're all going to end up being the same. So now the only place to run to is within your own little hovel, and then you hide from everyone. You turn into a hermit. Kermit the Hermit. That's what the end result of the Civil War is hermitage. That's it. Because if you mix with people, you've lost yourself. You've already sold yourself to the common good just by associating with other people, because of this sublimation and the inability for states to secede if they want to. Because if they secede, that's like the old idea. If a consumer doesn't like your business, he takes his business elsewhere. And then through loss of consumer base, the businessman goes, I must do something or else I die as a business. Yet if you force people to shop with you, you get to do as you like and please, and the consumer, go fuck yourself. That's the attitude of business if the consumer's forced to shop there against their will because there's no other choice, because of maybe an agglomeration, a big company swallowing a smaller one, and now there's no competitors left. We got a monopoly. We got a, is there another word besides monopoly? Well, a cartel would be similar. In any case, so we have a monopoly, and it's called the national government. It monopolized all the states against their will, and that was never meant to be in the original founding of the Constitution. So it's a funny thing that that because of that, we've had to make up the difference somehow in a perverted fashion, in as much as we're forced to all belong to the same global country that is pretty much a wash. It's all one, mess across the planet. And the only recourse we have is, can we hide? And of course, if somebody really wants to find us, they can pull us out on some warrant, and, oh, you broke some violation, even though you thought you were hiding. I mean, basically, anybody could find fault with you. You know, you wouldn't, and then pull you out of your presumed protective bubble of, oh, but I have a right to privacy. No, you don't. Anybody can come and grab you if they can, cook up a bunch of charges, and that's like losing your children, and now you've got to fight to get them back. You don't get to fight before you lose them. No, they get to be taken from you, and so that's the same kind of thing with a warrant that could be trumped up, and now you're taken, and it's like, holy shit. All because of that damn Civil War. We could have avoided it. And what was the thing we were supposed to do that we didn't know? Reinstate the 13th Amendment that was on the verge, or reestablish, or reaffirm the 13th Amendment that we ended up losing because we were on the verge of losing it completely. We hadn't lost it completely. We lost it at the federal level, and that's why the federal level was able to get away with monopolizing the states to create a union. That's what Lincoln did. He monopolized the states to create a union against their will. Yet the 13th Amendment was supposed to prevent that, but it was already missing at the federal level, at the national level, I mean. It wasn't yet gone from the state level, and so now it's gone from both national and state. That lost 13th Amendment. The missing 13th. Not the one having to do with slavery. That was the 14th, shortly after the war. You didn't know that. Your history teacher didn't tell you that the Slavery Amendment was actually number 14. and the so-called today's 14th Amendment was number 15. So, it's like, what? Nobody told me this. It just quietly disappeared. Because the states were subsumed by the Union, and so they knew what was what. But the federal government had a different set of standards and imposed it on the states. And thus, the 13th disappeared. The 13th Amendment just quietly disappeared. So that's what the Civil War was all about, was the rewriting of the Constitution without the states' participation, other than a war, which wasn't the way the original Constitution was set up. But the 9 states of the South walked out, so we didn't have a Constitution. So you see, so we never really put in a procedure for secession. We just assumed the states had the right to secede. But we didn't realize that if a sufficient number secede, the original Constitution is dissolved immediately because there's not a quorum to do business, and so that means all hell can break loose, and the national government can do as it pleases. So you see, we had a faulty Constitution to begin with that did not provide for secession, even though it was always presumed that the states had the right to secede if they disagreed with their national governments sufficiently enough. In other words, disagreed with their association with the other states. It's like, wow, we flunked. Our founding fathers flunked, and we're busy honoring and respecting and paying homage to them, and we got all kinds of monuments in Washington, and what's that other one? Mount Rushmore in somewhere. It's like, good grief. They blew it. They blew it big time. Duh. Or else we wouldn't have had a civil war, or the capacity for one, let alone the losses we've suffered because of the war, and the losses we suffered leading up to that war between the time that the 9 congressmen walked out and the day that Lincoln engaged his suppression of the rebellion. I mean, it's like, So everybody erred, not just Lincoln. Not just the southern states. Everybody made a boo-boo, and it all contributed to the mess. And that includes the error of omission of our founding fathers. Bigger time mess. But they couldn't have foreseen what has happened. Well, there you go. It happened. So here we have this issue of dwelling on the positive or dwelling on the negative. We either do one or the other. And the outcome will be more of whatever we dwell on. It snowballs. It gets bigger and bigger. It cascades. It gets bigger. It gains momentum. So it pays to not spend too much time on the negative, because it's always going to be a dead end. Total and annihilation. That's all it'll end up as. And so why dwell on the negative? Better to dwell on the positive. And if you have to, get away from negative people because they'll infect you. There's no way around it. One way or another, there's no way to stop the infection from happening if you continue to associate with them. Because if you associate with them, you support them. And if the people you are friendly with support the people you no longer support, then you're supporting the person. So you see, you'd almost have to be a recluse in today's world because everybody has infected everybody else with the negativity to some degree. Actually, we don't do that. We've got this third element that's actually quite nasty, and that's trivialization. So, oh, well, I can put up with it if I trivialize it. But what if somebody doesn't trivialize it? You know, what do you do when you trivialize something? Actually, that's not so bad. It's when you don't trivialize it that it's no good anymore. And there never is a final argument to anything, usually. People just die, and they're not around to argue anymore. So, what kind of finality is there to argumentation? There isn't any. That's kind of bogus. Oh, and I have the final argument, the last word on the subject. Oh, really? Goodbye. You're not very interesting. So actually, we've got a situation that's not quite the way we depict it as being. But it all comes back to what we dwell on, the positive or the negative. That's going to determine, and then there are consequences, though, and that's what this videotape is about, or this video discussion is about, is the consequences of either one of those two choices. In other words, I am free to pick and choose who I share myself with. And if I don't like a person, there's no reason why I should be obligated to be with that person. And that means, you know, working at a job. If you don't like your coworkers, if you don't like your boss, what the hell are you doing there for? Oh, I need the money. Okay, then go out on the street and steal. Then you'll be sure to be thrown in with a bunch of people in prison who either like being there because it's become their occupation and their profession of choice, or you all of a sudden realize you're in such an extreme negative condition that you better be positive and make the best of it, or you're going to be shit by the end of your session there. So either way, you know, we're forced under extreme circumstances to change our tune and to change our attitude. When we got something going good and we're on the top of the heap and we're standing on the heap of people on their heads at their expense, oh, we got it good until the people decide to leave. And oops, we don't have a nice head to stand on anymore and crush and abuse. So you see, there's value in walking away. And it's not enough. I learned from my brother's family, it's not enough to walk away. You have to stop feeding them. Because my brother would say, you know, it used to work that if the two kids were arguing, we'd walk out of the room and they'd stop arguing. It worked when I did it. But it stopped working with their parents because they still kept arguing. They just argued amongst each other and didn't involve their parents. So the parents should have stopped feeding the kids. Should have changed the locks on the doors and said, sorry, you don't get to come into our home anymore because you can't live by our standards of living peaceably among the two of you. So why should we let you into our home and bring that violence and that into our home? Hey, we'll just adopt you out. We'll go find somebody else. We'll have somebody else adopt you. We'll put you up for adoption. Hey, we can do that, Ooh, that's a new threat for parents. You'll be adopted out if you keep this up. Good. Oh, good. All right. So let's go for. And then you have to stand. If you make a threat and you don't follow through, you're. Come on, But really, there's no other way. Because violence, hey, what do they put on the bumper stickers on the backside of cars and on LA cops' cars? Domestic violence. There's no excuse for domestic violence, okay? So what are you going to do about it? Your kids are squabbling, and they continue to squabble, and they don't stop squabbling. You walk out of the room, they still squabble. Okay, so you adopt them out. End of story. Hey, we told you. If you don't stop, we're going to adopt you out. You don't believe me? Ooh, hey, I want peace in this house, and you know, people who want to get along. So there you go. There's a solution for everything. You just have to think positive. That's all. And that's positive, because then you know, instead of, oh, I got to wait for them to go to college. No, don't wait. Adopt them out now. You give them a warning. Maybe all you need to do is give them one. You don't even have to give them 2 or 3. One is all you need to give them. If they don't get it, then they don't respect you. If they don't respect you, they don't respect each other. It's no wonder they can't get along and they fight amongst each other. Respect kind of means something, and if you don't want to respect somebody, fine. Then you don't have to put up with living with them. Because before you know it, you'll be infected by the disrespect, and it'll poison you, and before you know it, you'll hate yourself and be miserable. Why be miserable? You're your own excuse for being alive. You're not somebody else's excuse for them being alive, and they're no excuse for you being alive. You're your own excuse for being alive. So when you're dead, you've got only yourself to answer to. Like, did it work out the way I wanted it to? No, it didn't. So, there you go.